had an amazing time this week so far? Yes, yes. Well, you are in for a treat. We have some global leaders who are here today to share about their experience working internationally. How many of you have worked in an international position before? Okay, very good. How many of you are interested in an international position? Okay, wonderful. So that helps us to kind of gauge where we go with the conversation. Let me introduce these beautiful ladies to you. First of all, we have Delecia Krevet. She is the Director of People Operations for Google's Global Business Organization, where she's responsible for leading a global leadership development rotational program designed to extend the organization's leadership talent. Since joining Google in 2014, she's also served as the Global Human Resource Lead for their data centers and G-Tech organizations. She's also held leadership roles across various companies and industries, including high tech, the United States Defense Contractors, and mass transits. Welcome.
Thank you.
Next we have Mrs. Kashina Van Dyke. She is the Global Head of Digital Channels and Client Data Analytics for Standard Chartered Bank. She's globally recognized as a fintech leader and has spent the past 25 years working for big financial names such as Citibank, MasterCard, and Standard Chartered. She's lived overseas for most of the past 20 years, having moved internationally 8 times. 2 weeks ago, she moved to Singapore and traveled 22 hours to be back here with us today. So thank you so much. That's love, right?
All the black women could get me here.
Right.
Like, and Caroline telling me you need to be here.
Right. So thank you so much. And last but definitely not least, we have Carrie Chandler, who is the Chief Human Resource Officer for Endeavor, a global leader in entertainment, sports, and fashion. Previously, she's worked with Christie's International, the NBA, Disney, and ESPN. She was named a game changer among women in sports by Sports Business, one of the most powerful women in business by Black Enterprise, and Biz Women's Top 100 Business Women to Watch. Welcome. I know, power, right? So we're gonna jump right into the questions because we have so many questions that we wanna ask because a lot of us are probably curious about how these ladies got to the top of their career. So let's start with Kashina. How early should one begin seeking global opportunities?
So I think intentionality is a really important concept that I try to live, but it's hard. I was very intentional, even when I was choosing my first job in New York City. I turned down a job that would have paid me more for an ad agency because they weren't global. And I knew that eventually I wanted to work internationally, so I had to pick a company that had a global footprint and global presence, even though I had no idea how I was going to get there. But so I think intentionality and knowing what's important to you. So for me, that was in my right out of school in my 20s, choosing companies that could give me potentially a global opportunity.
Wonderful. And Carrie, speaking of being intentional, what advice would you give for finding a mentor or an advocate to help you as you're being intentional about those positions?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I'm just loving the fact that we're having this conversation because I think it is extremely critical to grow in your career, especially if you want to be an executive. I believe in terms of mentorship, you have to find someone who's done it. And it doesn't matter if they look like you or not, but find someone who's done it. If you can, find someone whose personal circumstances match yours as well, because I believe if you go on assignment, single, married, married with no kids, married with kids, I mean, I've seen all scenarios in my HR career, and that matters. The personal piece of it is just as important as the professional piece, and if the personal piece isn't right, it's going to be really hard to be successful professionally. So I think you've got to find people who've done it, and the closer they are to sort of matching your personal circumstances, the better.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Delecia, how hard is it for Black women to acquire this experience? As intentional as we may be, it can be a little difficult to find those opportunities.
You know, I think the barriers for us are in our minds, and I'll go back to, for those of you who heard Phylicia Rashad yesterday, and she said the biggest obstacle she had was herself. Wow. And so I think for us, as Black women seeking these opportunities, we have to get out of our own way. I do believe that it's not any more challenging, we just have to step up and be bold in saying this is what I want and being intentional about going to make it happen.
Gotcha. Kashina, what would you say is the biggest obstacle that you've had to get over?
Well, first of all, I just want to double click on what she just said, because I think self-limiting beliefs, although we think we don't have them, every time I hit a new level, I realize I have a new belief system that I have to crush and crumble and destroy.
Yes, yes.
Whether that was put in me by society or whether I grew up with some, and so I think that's really important, that like why can't I? And so once you imagine the possibility, the art of the possibility for your life to be exactly what you want, and if you can imagine it, then it's there for you. I think that's really powerful. Once you get past that, I think the second obstacle is you don't really know anyone who's done it, right? Like I didn't know anyone who had done it. Nobody in my family had done it. Nobody that I went to school with had done it. I heard about maybe somebody, I don't know, but they seem strange. So I think, it's like, but if it's not in your own community and it's not in your own experience, it's scary. And so the second thing I would just say is that you do have to seek out people who have done it so it doesn't feel so scary. And a point that I always say to myself, which is, growth happens outside of your comfort zone and outside of your experience. So guess what? If it's scary, it means you're about to grow. And so I now replace that fear, scary feeling with, oh, I'm about to really grow and expand now. And I think that's, again, it goes back to you, but it also goes, let me find at least one person and ask people, like, do you know anybody who lived in Germany? Is that okay? Are they okay over there? And just, be clear and articulate it so you can kind of remove some of that fear factor.
That's a great point. And Kerry, just touching on that a little bit, what would you say are some of the areas that Black women are able to excel, like some countries that we should maybe avoid or countries that are better for our careers?
I don't believe in any such thing. I believe that it's a globe for a reason, and we get to go around it as many times as we want to. And Kashina just said 70% of what I wanted to say on this panel.
We agree.
I know, exactly, because it is fear. Yeah. First, we should start and say, how many times have we even considered moving within our own country?
Right.
That's fearful in and of itself. And so I think we have to acknowledge it and recognize it, and then realize that a lot of it is in our head. It's the unknown, and it's just like when you start a new job. People think that starting a new job is only scary when you're first coming out of college. It's scary every time I've started a new job. It's been scary.
Right.
But because I know that I've done it before and I've put myself in uncomfortable situations before, that's what sort of propels me to be able to do it again. And in terms of where to go or where not to go, I think the key is really about being educated about where you're going, being educated about business norms where you're going, and about social norms where you're going. And if you work for a company that doesn't provide that kind of training or education before you go, you have to seek it out on your own. One of the biggest learnings for me, and fortunately when I moved to Hong Kong, I was working for Disney, and Disney did a great job. You got to actually go to cultural training for a week in preparation, and they designed the training based upon your life. So they knew I was a single Black woman, and I don't give me the training for the man with the wife and the 2 kids and the dog, and it was extraordinarily helpful to me. But I think it amazes me today how often companies will send someone somewhere with zero preparation, and then we go thinking that whatever made us successful where we are is what's going to make us successful where we go. And depending upon where you're going, it may be the direct opposite. I'm a very type A person. I'm uncomfortable with silence. I'm one of these leaders, I want everybody to contribute in the room. Well, I was going to Asia. That's totally the opposite. The ladies are shaking their head. Totally the opposite of how people show up successfully there. So I had that education before I went. I knew that, but I still had to constantly check myself. So to me, again, it's just about preparation. And to me, the more different it is from your current life or circumstances, the better the opportunity for you, because that's where the growth is going to happen.
So what other resources would you all like to share that might be available for someone who's interested in just preparing themselves for the opportunity before they actually get the opportunity?
The thing I would say, and different from these ladies, I've actually never lived abroad. So I have been intentional and sought opportunities with large global companies that afforded me the chance to go be in country 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time, come home. So I would go and have these experiences. But I've actually never lived abroad, but I travel extensively. I think in 2015, that was my biggest travel year, and I hit 100,000 miles that year. So it was a rough year, but it's a lot of travel. But I think the resources come in a more informal way, at least for me. I made a point of connecting with those who had done it, those who had influence in the regions where I wanted to know more about and have opportunity to be in. I wanted to dissect, at one point, Google's business from a certain perspective, and so I just started talking. I took the role in the data centers and started talking to people. What is it about going to Finland and how is work done in Finland, and help me understand. So I made it a choice to sit with people who had nothing to do with my current day-to-day role, but I knew they could give me context around where I was trying to get to. And so that was a resource for me, was just leveraging a broad network across Google at the time in particular.
I would say the curiosity, which is what you're talking about. So the curiosity / preparation. So number one, if you know somebody, because you've been talking to people and saying, I'd like to move abroad. I'm like a broken record. When I get something, I'm like, I want everybody I meet, like a postman, I'd like to move abroad. Do you know anybody who's moved abroad? But I think that there has to be a curiosity in this kind of, can I take you out to coffee? So-and-so told me that you had this experience. And having that one-on-one. I also, though, was looking at like blogs. I'd be like, Black people in the Czech Republic, right?
I totally did that.
And
right? I totally
I'm moving to Prague. I want to know, are there any Black people in the Czech Republic? I don't think so, but maybe there are. And you know what? Guess what? We're everywhere, by the way. I will share that just because I did just move to Singapore 3 weeks ago, maybe only 2 weeks ago. And on my third day, I got invited to go to a Ash Wednesday gumbo party. And Creole, and it was through a friend of a friend, right? And she's in this room, but she was like, oh, my girl has been there for a while, you'll love her. She gets the message, and that day, all of a sudden, I'm sitting there having gumbo with like, my peeps, right? And they're telling me, oh, we go to the International Baptist Church and we do this and this. So my point is about curiosity and networking and connections. The more you vocalize what you want, you will find community everywhere.
Yeah,
everywhere.
It's funny what you're saying, because one of my pieces of advice is immerse yourself in the culture wherever you go. But during the time you're wherever you are, you will seek those, like you need those reminders of home, or you get homesick. And is Cheryl in here from the NBA? So who just raised her hand, who spent 4 years in India and I think 2 in Hong Kong. We were laughing last night. I don't know how we got on the topic, but I was like, I found some grits in Hong Kong. And, and she was like, what was the name of the place? And I couldn't remember the name of the place. And speaking of Google, I literally just put in Hong Kong grits. 4 restaurants came up, and then I was able to remember the name of the place. So there's really almost no excuse nowadays. Like, you can find almost anything you want to research on your own, and then if you can combine it with like real life people who can tell you things and share stories and connections, then even better.
I would just say also, become the queen, to your point, become the queen of the coffee chat. I mean, I have had find out their thing. Is it coffee? Is it wine? Is it you want to walk around the park while we have this conversation? Put yourself out there, extend yourself, find out what their thing is, and be comfortable doing that with them to get the information you need. You have to meet people where they are, because they're not going to come to you. So be intentional about who you want to seek time with, and then be intentional about how you spend that time with them.
Wonderful. And another part of the preparation is leaving family and friends behind. Kashina, I know you just left your twins behind. So can you each speak on how you prepared your family and friends, especially with them not really understanding what you're doing and why you're going abroad?
Yeah, so I did I have 8-year-old twins. And we decided for them, oh, look, my 8-year-old is right there. Because I flew in from Singapore, and then I stopped in California and picked her little cute behind up and brought her here with me, right? Because I wanted to spend time with her, and I wanted to be here, right? And so you need to do both. So I would say there's two two different aspects of it. When I first left, I'm very close to my family. I have a big family. Like Thanksgiving is like 45 people, all right? We get down, and our family is very close. And the idea of leaving my family was really hard. And I remember the first, I was single, I was in my 20s, and I said to my dad, Daddy, I got this job offer and I'm gonna go on assignment and it's only gonna be like a few months, but I don't know what to do and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like kind of feeling like, even though I've been telling him for like a decade I wanted to do this. And he's like, so if it doesn't work out, what are you talking about? You get on a plane. The planes go both ways, come home. Click your heels 3 times, girl, what you talking about? And so this whole idea, and that was my anchor, because my dad said, you can always come home. And then I was like, so what am I afraid of? Not the planes are gonna stop? What am I afraid of? And so this whole idea of I can always go home. And I made a point of coming home, even though I didn't have a lot of money when I was like, you know, in my 20s or I was spending it doing other things. But I made sure that I came home and I was home for Thanksgiving or I was home for Christmas, because without that anchor, I couldn't be me. Okay, like if I didn't know I had my family and I could see them in all our craziness once a year, and then obviously I got a little bit more responsible, and then I go home twice a year, and then by the end of my international European assignment, I was home 4 or 5 times a year, and I was always in the vineyard in August, and I was always in my hometown for Thanksgiving or Christmas, and those were my anchors, and everything else didn't matter. So whatever their anchor is, you need to do that. I will say though, with children, it's a different dynamic and scenario. Now, even though my kids were born abroad, we've been in California for 4 years. And that decision with my husband to say, okay, we're gonna do this Asia thing, and we're gonna do it together. And that's really important, because I would say, like, your partner has to be 1,000% down, especially if you're the leading. Like I'm the executive, I am the breadwinner, I am the one who makes it all happen, and he has taken a support role. That being said, if he's not down, I can't be successful. So if you're in a partnership, just make sure that you're having those conversations early. And you know, luckily we decided we were all gonna move, and then coronavirus hit, and I decided that it'd be safer for the kids to finish 2nd grade and they'll come in the summer. But that's a hard decision. I'm like, I've never been away from my babies for like, you know, more than a business trip, and then all of a sudden, like, I'm on FaceTime every day, but like, you know, I'm not cuddling them, I can't smell them at night, you know, and it's hard. But you have to make some trade-offs, and I think that you have to know what those trade-offs are gonna be. So I would say being single was much easier, but then I think, you know, finding the partner, if you're in a partnership, if this is important to you, having that conversation early. Sorry for being so long, but 2 very different realities.
Actually, the only thing I was going to add from an HR perspective, so both times I moved somewhere was London and Hong Kong. I've been single, but from an HR perspective, I've helped move tons of families abroad, and I'm sure you can relate to it. And what Kashina just said is extraordinarily important. There's actual research that shows that when you go abroad as a couple, you're either going to get far closer or you're going to break up. There's very rare in between. I mean, there's actual research on this. Sorry, right, exactly. And
Good thing I met him abroad.
Right. And so that's part of the preparation, though, having those conversations, making sure that your partner is included in all of the pre-assignment stuff. I've seen situations where a company has asked someone to move without even going to the location.
Yeah, no, that's not cool.
Just say, if you're interested, you know, I'm extraordinarily interested, but I need to go on a pre-planning trip just to make sure. And you bring your family with you.
And no company should ever ask you. I mean, we were there in December, and it was like they flew me and the kids and my husband business class. First time my kids were ever in business class, like we're like, ooh, ice cream, this is great. But you need that, because if they're not comfortable with it, it's not going to work. Yeah. So I think that's important. If a company's not willing to do that, then I would say it's probably not. Yeah.
And I would also add to that, I had an opportunity back in 2018 to potentially move to London with Google, and I talked to my husband about it. And he's been with his company 25 years, and he was just like, yeah, no, I'm not feeling moving to London. I was like, but your company is there. He works for a large global company as well. I'm like, but your company is there. He's like, yeah, no, not feeling London. He was like, my husband's German, and he was like, we could go to Germany, we could go to Switzerland, but not London. I was like, okay, yeah, parameters. He had parameters.
Yeah,
It's like, okay. So I had to go back, and I was disappointed about the opportunity, but what it said to me is it wasn't the right opportunity. Because if my partner, we don't have children, so it is just us, we can make a decision to get up and go. But if my partner, my number one is like, I can't, I don't have any interest in living there, it wasn't going to work. And so I just passed on it, and I've put the word out, keep me apprised of things that are in these geographical areas.
She's like, Berlin. You have anything in Berlin?
Can I get to Berlin, Munich, I can make it work.
Awesome. So share with us how working globally has impacted your career.
For me, it has been phenomenal. I think I started my career at Apple back in the early 90s, and I was talking back then about what I thought I wanted to do, doing something global and international. That whole, in your 20s, you know, the sky is the limit. And when I did that, when I was at Apple, I just saw what I thought I wanted to be. And so it put in my mind and in my spirit that I know I want to grow beyond this call center role of supporting higher education sales support. It put the fire in, this truly is my stepping stone, and now what? And every role I've taken since that first role at Apple back in 1992 has been one that was going to set me on a path to get more and more international experience. And if it's not experience, exposure. Opportunity to sit in the rooms with people who are doing that type of work. And I always made a point to just grow and build upon that. Sometimes the global aspect of the role was far less important than growing in my craft, and my craft is HR. And then, so I focused on the craft and figured out ways to weave it in, but it was always a North Star to continue to gain that global exposure and opportunities. So for me, it's been just a North Star for always, and I've only worked at one company in my career that didn't have a global perspective. It was very much a US-based centric company.
Yeah, I would just say I think it's the biggest differentiator. I say this to young women all the time starting out in their career, because by the way, it's easier to move when you're single and you don't got to ask anybody. So I just say to these, you know, young women getting out, I'm like, go international as soon as you can. Because here's the thing, all of a sudden you are differentiated from a value perspective, because you've had the international experience. Because a lot of people think about it, a lot of people talk about it, but you've actually done it. And what that means is you embraced risk, you dealt with change, you managed successfully all of these unknown quantities, from where to get your hair done to how to buy something in a grocery store when the alphabet isn't even the same alphabet that you grew up with. You know, all of those things, and yet you were successful despite all that. So that's what it says. It actually says like 50 things when you're like, did an assignment in Kazakhstan, right? It's like, that's what that says. People understand that. So it's a differentiator from a value perspective. But there's something else that I just want to get across, is that when you go abroad, if you've spent most of your life in this country, you are going to be freed from a whole lot of beliefs of society about you. And when you do that, and this is important, and this is really from my heart about why I think it's so important, and there's a reason why Maya Angelou, Richard Wright, and Josephine Baker went abroad. Okay, there's a reason to free their spirits and their souls. Because when you go and you live in a place that doesn't have all of these perceived notions about your own abilities, you do start to find new parts of yourself that just didn't get any sunlight. And all of a sudden the sunlight comes in and you start growing these beautiful seeds that were in you, but they just couldn't come out here. And so the other thing about power is it's inside of you, but not all environments are sunny, and not all environments are giving you nourishment. And so just releasing yourself from that, even if it's a 6-month assignment, even if it's a 1-month assignment, even if it's a 10-year assignment, is incredibly powerful to your own belief systems that need to be expanded. And I think that's a really important thing. So yes, on your resume, it looks good. People are like, you are different. You have value that the other 99% don't have. But inside your soul, you now know it's all bullshit of what they're trying to tell you you can do and what you can't do. You realize it's all constructed, and that a lot of those constructed beliefs get into our own spirit.
It's super important. It's, I believe, for me, it's been a game changer. A lot of what you said, Kashina, because let me talk a little bit about going as a single person. Going as a single person, and a lot of it depends on where you're going and at what stage it is in your life. There can be times of loneliness. I definitely had that.
Yes.
I found, especially in Hong Kong at the time that I went, I didn't fit into the expat world because 99% of the expat world were families. And typically the expat was a man with a traveling female spouse and children. And I didn't, of course, 100% fit into the, the local world either. So I found myself straddling between both worlds. And I see Caroline sitting in the front row, and I had just met Caroline around the time that I went, and she tried so hard to get me to journal. And I actually found on my computer the other day, I started doing it, I just never finished, and I found out, I was like, I should have really kept doing this. So, but I just remember how much I learned about myself. And I always say, you have to be comfortable in your own skin because you're going to spend a whole lot of time in it, just like right there, all your normal things that you might do typically when you don't have anything else to do, you can't do that. You can't find the same stuff on TV, all that. And that's a little different now with, everything being streamed and stuff like that. But it was so amazing in the end because it got you past those periods of fear and doubt, and then you realize what you actually can do personally and what you actually can do professionally. And you learn to meet and become friends with all sorts of people that you never, thought you would meet and be friends with. To this day, I still stay in touch with people in Hong Kong, and I'm talking about local Hong Kong Chinese people that I worked with. And it was an amazing experience, but it's a game changer, both because of what's on your resume, but also because of who you become and how you learn to think. And for me, in a global role right now, I think it gives people an appreciation that I understand what it's like to be in a region. For those of you guys who work in big global corporations, people always think that, especially if it's an American-based company, that we can't really relate to what's happening in the other regions. And it gives you a little bit of credibility that way as well, too.
So I'm gonna ask one more question. If you all have any questions, please go to the microphone and we'll get started. They're on both sides, and we'll get started with the question and answer. Just quickly, how do you assess the risk and reward of an opportunity? Aside from the relationship aspect with your partner or your family, how do you look at an organization that's saying, hey, we want you to go to Hong Kong, and you decide like this is the opportunity for me?
I'll start. I mean, for me, I look at every career opportunity through a professional and a personal lens. And it's really, really hard for me to come up with a scenario where it's not a win when I look at it that way. Because if I'm only looking at it in terms of how I'm going to advance in the company, actually, if I looked at the Hong Kong opportunity that way, I wouldn't have taken it. I remember I was the head of HR at ESPN, which is part of the Walt Disney Company, when that opportunity became available. I reported to the president of ESPN. When I moved to Hong Kong, it was when Hong Kong Disneyland first opened up, and I reported to the head of HR for Asia Pacific for Parks and Resorts, who reported to the head of Parks and Resorts, who reported to the president of Parks and Resorts, who reported, I reported like 4 or 5 layers lower than the position that I was in. And I remember, Hater Nation, people coming up to me saying, oh, isn't that job? And I would just kind of nod my head, like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. But I knew it was going to be a great opportunity for me. I knew I was going to learn so much. I was scared as hell, but I'm really, really glad I did it. So clearly there's things you have to weigh. There are times in your life when you can do it, and there's times in your life when you can't do it. If you're in a time in your life right now where you can do it, my advice is to do it.
Go.
So.
Quickly.
Yeah, go quickly. So I think the trade-offs. It depends on where you are. If it's your first international assignment, just take whatever they give you, please. Just take it, right? Because it's like, A, you might love it, you might not. You're gonna be scared. Fear doesn't keep you safe, which is one of my favorite lines I have to tell myself all the time. Fear does not keep you safe, right? But just do it. And then as you get more advanced, I mean, this was my 8th international move. So like for this move, it was like, it had to make sense for where I'm trying to get, okay? Like I've put 25 years in, I have X years left, my goal is to hit this. Does this put me in pole position? And A, and B, the boss. So it was like, it's Singapore. It wasn't on the top. I'm gonna tell you, we weren't like, oh, let's move to Singapore. I mean, we also have we have a family business in Martha's Vineyard. I mean, it is not easy, right? Flying around, Singapore is far away, right? But the job opportunity was so amazing. And the company, I felt like it was a company I could grow in. And I really liked the CEO. And I got the feeling, and this is the other thing I will say, you need to be working for somebody who has your back. You need to be working for somebody that you feel sees you and gets you. And if you have that opportunity to work for somebody who's gonna, because you're gonna need somebody to have your back. We all need people to have our back. And I will say, in general, it's like we can be very loyal, but not always get that loyalty back in return. And so it's really important that you feel some kind of connection. I had a lot of different opportunities I was looking at. I went to Standard Chartered because I felt like this was the most diverse company. I look around, they had like pictures of like different nationalities all over the bank. My CEO had lived in like 10 different countries. He was British, but he had spent most of his career internationally working in the Middle East and Africa and Asia. So my point is that like pick the person and don't worry so much about the level or the this or the that. Depending on where you are in your career, I wanted it all because I'm at a certain point in my life where I feel like I deserve choices. But you just really have to figure out, what are you looking for? You're looking for the experience, don't worry about the title. And other times you're looking for the title because it's going to put you in position for CEO, then you're in that position. But also don't forget, at the end of the day, your boss, just like who you pick to marry or partner with is important, who you pick to be that person, to be your wing woman or wing man that's got your back is important. They're waving at the back. I got to stop talking. Like, stop talking.
So we'll start over here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So my question is as you've made these decisions to move into an international space, my mind thinks, well, they must have been compensated in some way to move into those spaces, or maybe they compensated as far as like your travel or your expenditures. And I'm making a broad assumption here, right? Depending on the move that you choose. How do you negotiate what that looks like for yourself? Have you used an outside attorney for that? What does that look like? Where do you start?
I mean, there's people from HR here, but it's pretty standard. I mean, they move people abroad all the time, so you shouldn't be starting from scratch. Of course they cover your expenses to move abroad. I mean, they're not like, I'll see you in Prague in a month, you know? So they have a standard package, and big companies who do this all the time, I think HR, but it's like they already have the standard package set. Like, and some companies, back when I started, there were expat packages and all types of craziness. And you know, some companies, like in Germany, you have a car. That's part of the standard package. They give you, go to the showroom and pick a brand new car, because that's what all the employees in Germany have. If you're an international, they can pay for housing or they cannot pay for housing, but they're going to compensate you in a way that you're going to be able to pay for your own housing. I mean, everything is very comfortable, but I didn't use an external attorney, but that's because I think they're standard packages. I don't know, you guys are...
Yeah, our standard packages, some flexibility for negotiation, no need to bring in anyone external. I always tell folks, find out what your company offers, and then see if it meets your needs, because I am a firm believer, even though I'm in HR, everything is negotiable. Everything is an opportunity. You know, my mother always said, closed mouths don't get fed. So you have to go in and say, this is what I need, this is what the baseline package offers. Here is where I see the gaps based on my needs for me and my family to be able to make this work. And so it's a conversation. Don't come in with outlandish requests, but but I will also say, having negotiated tech packages for white men in tech and see the things they ask for and get, it made me much more bolder in my ask, Like,
There's
oh,
a lot
we're
of
doing
truth
that
to
today. Okay.
No, white men in tech,
Yeah, it's
4 years
a-
in Silicon Valley. I agree with you, but I will say the package. Know what the package is.
Know the base.
Go
You need to
in
know the baseline
base.
package
Yeah.
because your negotiation starts base plus.
Yeah, exactly.
So don't just settle for this is what we offer unless you believe that is truly something that works for you, because typically there is room to negotiate there.
The only thing I would add are there are different kinds of assignments.
Yeah.
So especially nowadays, a lot of these really luxurious expat packages, companies have scaled back on those. And when I
Yes.
say expat packages, it means you're going on an assignment with a specific end date and the intent to return. There are tons of assignments now that are, we call one-way assignments, and people are like, oh, I don't want to do that. And what I tell them is, if the company asked you to move from New York to Chicago, you wouldn't say, when am I going back? And you wouldn't, to your point, think that you're necessarily stuck there for the rest of your life either, right? And so I would say be open to those kinds of opportunities as well. And the packages look very different for the one-way assignments because you're localized, is what they called. So, but if you work for a big company, they are standardized, so that's the key for you to know. There's the package, and then there's your salary, two separate things.
And you're not going to be hungry doing international assignments, right?
Never.
I'll tell you that right now. You're not going to be sitting there like, ooh, can I make next month's rent? Yeah, it's not.
Depending upon who you work, she works in banking, so just saying, right?
Financial services, that's all I'm saying.
Thank you, ladies.
Good day, ladies. I'm Keisha Walker, Insights Marketing. I'm actually a 21-year entrepreneur, so I'm asking from a different place than people that are currently in corporate. I thank you all for your time today. I've been to Singapore and Hong Kong, all over the world actually, and I'm interested in taking my business overseas and actually living overseas as well. My first choice is Africa, but I'm flexible. I love the entire world, so wherever that is. But what I wanted to ask is, if I decide to make that move, I would like to have business outside of the United States. And what are the opportunities, especially for either multicultural agencies and of women of color outside the United States, either with your companies and or with some other U.S. quote unquote based and or international companies, firms that may be opportunities for women entrepreneurs or looking at leaving the United States and moving overseas?
That's a good question. I would say, just because there's a woman who I just met in Singapore, I would say that different places offer different opportunities of ease of use of setting up a company, right? So there are places that, like in Dubai, in Singapore, et cetera, that are much easier for entrepreneurs to set up shop. That being said, I think you need to have some business already. You need to have connections there already. So I would just suggest, jurisdictionally, it probably will be very easy for you to start up shop, but you want to have some customers, right? And already be making those connections. And Dubai might work better for, Middle East, Africa, I don't know, but I would definitely do some research about ease of setting up business, and then how do you actually start getting some revenue customers.
We do a lot in sports, so Kerry, I'd love to talk to you afterwards.
Okay, fantastic.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Dale Hunter from Dallas, Texas, and I have two questions. Did you have to learn a new language? Like, are you in English-speaking countries, number one? And number two, what has been the biggest lesson learned from going abroad? Like, maybe, I know you've been traveling or abroad for several years. Were there some mistakes you made early on that you've since learned from, and what was the biggest lessons from that?
For me, Hong Kong and London, clearly London, although there's British English and American English, but I didn't have to learn another language. However, when I was in Hong Kong, I did attempt to take Mandarin lessons. The main language in Hong Kong is Cantonese, but it is a very difficult language, and I quit my lessons, so a lot of people quit their lessons. And in terms of biggest learnings, for me, it was what I mentioned earlier about recognizing that what makes you successful in your home country is probably very different than what's going to make you successful. And when I say successful, just successful in day-to-day business, how you show up, how you communicate, what works, business norms, those sorts of things, and just really becoming comfortable in a situation that is not one in which you were sort of nurtured and raised.
And I would just say, no, you can speak English. English is the global business language, fortunately for us. However, I always made an effort to study. So I studied German when I was in Germany. I actually got pretty good, mostly because I was in the bars and hanging out with Germans. But I studied Spanish when I was in Spain. I'm going to study Mandarin and I don't expect to get good, but just to be able to be polite.
Basics. So basics, hello, goodbye, thank you, how to direct direction. So
Yeah.
I
Is there
forgot all
chicken in
mine,
this?
but-
Like, like,
Where's the bathroom?
I just see the
Chicken in
basics.
this, right?
Yeah.
That is so funny.
Plus one to everything they said, not required English global language for Google as well. The one time I challenged myself to learn a language, I was negotiating employment contracts and trying to prevent works councils from coming into play in France. And it was important to be able to speak French.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to get it up quickly, at least to get to it. It didn't work. I hired a brilliant translator and just went that route. Wasn't going to work.
Negotiating in French, I was like, wow, girl, you was workers count, the unions.
Good afternoon, ladies. My name is Charmaine Bouffon-Chenault. I'm an IT manager at FedEx. And one of the questions I have for you is that working closely and mentoring African American women who have kind of find their path and way in life from a career perspective later in life, where they've got husbands and children and all of that. And one of the things I've noticed is that they've missed out on a lot of opportunities to catapult their careers simply because of that rich culture in the African community about being around your family and everyone. So my question to you is, how do we go about changing the perceptions of making sure that your children have passports and going ahead and making a decision to take your kids abroad while they're young so that they can start getting exposed to that early, so when these opportunities come up later in life, they're more likely to take the step and take the jump in their careers? What are your thoughts around that?
I mean, for me, it's just, I don't have any kids. I have 13 nieces and nephews, but one's at Spelman right now, one graduated from Spelman. Both of them did study abroad. So I think that's one of the biggest opportunities. But even younger, like looking at your young daughter over there, if you have the opportunity to do it, some people don't have the opportunity to do that for whatever reason, financially, or their job doesn't lend itself to. But if you have the opportunity to do it, I think just becoming a global citizen. You said you haven't done an assignment, but you've talked about all these trips that you've been on. It's amazing how many people will have some of these opportunities to do these things, and they're like, I don't want to do it. What? I don't know. Where's that? When we were laughing last night when I was telling people I was going to Hong Kong, and my best friends in the room, she'll remember this. People kept asking me, do I like sushi? And will I be eating a lot of sushi? I was like, I'm not going to Japan. These are people with like multiple degrees. And so it's like there's just not enough global citizenry to me. There's no excuse now to, you can sort of have a global mindset without even leaving the continent. And so I think just infusing young people with as many of those opportunities to do that as possible, and we all kind of have a responsibility to do that. That's why I'm so happy that we're having this session here today.
And I think people peak at different times. I think now at 48, I'm about ready to take off. But I wasn't 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And I do think that sometimes for different circumstances and reasons, you can peak at different times in your life because the circumstances allow it. So I don't think everybody has to peak at 33 or 43 or 53 or 63. You peak when you're ready, and so I don't think there's a lot of pressure around when you're peaking. And someone told me this a long time ago. A woman said women peak later than men, because I would see all these guys and they're like late 20s, early 30s, and I'm like, they seem to be taking off, right? And I was wondering why my career didn't. But so I think peaking is in picking your moments. The other thing is about your children. I think sometimes we think that we have to set there's this formula for the perfect childhood, right? And that's like they know the same schools and I have the white picket fence. And all I will say is your children are going to be happy when you're happy. Children, like my kid, she was born in London. She doesn't even remember Dubai. She was like 3 when we went to Dubai. Now we're going, when I told her in Christmas we're moving, I want to leave my friends. And then it's like, oh, wait, there's new friends to be had. So I think that, we put these belief systems in, and a couple years anywhere is good for them too. So I don't know. That's my philosophy.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Christina Edwards with Marshalling Resources. I'm the IT support specialist there. And I actually have 2 quick questions. At one point, I was looking to work abroad, and I had posted my resume out on one of the job postings for jobs, and I got a lot of contact with recruiting companies who were charging fees, a lot of fees, in order, with the promise that they could get you employment overseas. So my question is, would you recommend like working with an agency that connects you with companies, or looking for companies to seek actual employment with them? And then my second question is, I've heard you guys speak a lot about starting very young. What are your thoughts about a more mature woman who's wanting to get into working abroad?
I would say don't pay a fee. Your network is probably richer than you think it is. And so be curious enough to lean into your network and ask people who they know, because inevitably you're going to find somebody who knows somebody who can have you in Singapore eating gumbo. You
gotta know Lisa. She's in the front row.
Yeah. but you will. So you shouldn't have to pay. In my opinion, you shouldn't have to pay to get that opportunity. Just lean into your network a little bit more, and be curious. Talk to people. People love to talk about themselves. They love it. They relish the opportunity. So if you see someone who is doing that thing you want to be doing, reach out to them and say, I am so impressed by your background and I would love to buy you a cup of coffee. Please let me know when it's convenient. Okay. And tell them what you're trying to do, and people will be more than happy to help you in that regard, but I would definitely say don't pay for it. And just in terms, it's the point that we've kind of said, we peak at different times, and it is never too late to chase your dream.
That's right.
It is never too late to chase your dream. So if that is what you want, go get it, girl. Go get it.
Okay, so I'll meet you later for coffee, okay?
Mine is wine. My thing is wine.
Hi, my name is Bree Taylor, and I have a foundation. So I'm single and I'm seasoned, and I'm just now chasing my dream. The foundation is 17 years, but now I'm going into the Gambia. And I'm solar, water, and climate change.
Yes, girl, get it.
Get it. Yeah, I'm scared, but I'm growing.
You're going, get it.
And I don't know how to not do this. I have to do this. I'm going to do this. Yes. And so a closed mouth doesn't get fed. This is global. This is why I'm here. And I want each and every one of your cards and connections. I want to be connected to you. And without going into further about what I'm doing.
I'm on LinkedIn. Connect with me. I look at all my LinkedIn messages. I will respond to you. But let me tell you, what you're doing is really important, because sustainability and the investments, trillions are going into sustainability, especially in Africa. Yes. You are picking like this is the time, this is the place. And I know a lot of people who are doing it, and none of them look like you. So go get it. Go get it.
And the sustainability for this whole project is to empower the women to be entrepreneurs by the agriculture.
Go get it. Absolutely.
So that's what. And I have twins, twin grandsons. So even though I'm single, I still am accountable to 3 boys. That's right. And so this is another reason why I'm doing it, because they have to see. You know.
Good for you. Congratulations. Congrats.
Hello, I'm Erica Cherry with T Connectivity. I'm actually exploring an opportunity to possibly move to Singapore with my family, which I also have 8-year-old twins.
Oh my God!
Girls. Yeah, so just you talk. I know a lot of twins, right?
Stanford American School is the best school.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Okay, so you talked a little bit about family, and you also talked a little bit about just your personal experience with how you felt moving over. Can you talk a little bit about the children's experience with moving over and how they feel about being away from their extended family?
Like, give me
Because I'm very close to my family as well, and my kids, I'm originally from Louisiana, so I'm looking forward to that gumbo in Singapore. But they are already like, oh my God, we're away from Louisiana, but I can only imagine what that looks like in Singapore. So, and then the second piece to that is their experience in another country as far as like schools and, learning new friends and stuff like that.
Yeah. I'm sorry, what you said?
If we can answer it quickly. 'cause
Very
we-
quickly, really quickly. We can talk later. I would just say like 3 major points there. Singapore is an amazing place for kids. It is safe. It is like everything. There's 50 different schools they can go to, 6 different American schools. But I do think this whole idea of like, you've got to let your kids know that no matter where you are in the world, you are going to be connected to your family. You have anchors that will not change. They will not change. They are who you are, and you will always make time to make sure that you're home for Louisiana, for whatever that is, whether it's Ash Wednesday or it's Thanksgiving or it's, so they need to know they have anchors, and I can talk to you more about the specifics.
And the only thing I'll add real quickly from families moving abroad, the more difficult thing for the kids is when they have to come home, because they adapt way better than the parents by far. So
that's a good
don't
point.
let that be a fear.
All right, we're going to take one last question.
Hi, my name's Carell Valentine. I'm with Genentech. I just had a question regarding the immigration procedures, getting work visas, things like that. You talked about one-way assignments. Eventually, that work visa is going to expire in a lot of different cases. What does that transition at the end of that period look like?
Your company will, if your company is sending you on a one-way assignment, they will always help you with that.
Yeah.
And it depends on what country you're going to. There's all sorts of different visa requirements, et cetera. They expire at different times. They can transition into a different kind of visa. It's one of the last things you have to worry about if your company is sending you there.
Your company's sending you there, it's all taken care of. They have immigration lawyer. I sign papers. Somebody else does everything. Right. I mean, that's just the reality. You don't have to worry about your work visa. Nobody expires your work visa. It's as long as you're working. Now, if you stop working, you probably have to leave the country.
That's a different story. Or if you get fired abroad.
Or if you get fired.
Yeah, you probably have 30 days afterwards to leave, but you're sponsored by your employer.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, ladies, for joining us for
Thank
this
you.
conversation. Did you all learn something new? Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we have to take a